Good morning. What a beautiful, crisp Sunday morning the Lord's blessed us with. If you would, as you're turning to your Bibles in Jeremiah chapter 2, we're going to focus on about 4 or 5 verses there. I want to remind you of a couple things coming up in the very near future. The first is, for all of you men, on the 30th of this month, that would be a week from this coming Saturday, we are going to have our third annual Leader Lift program. We've had it twice before. Brother Bob Turner was here the first time, and then Bruce McClarty, the president of Harding University, was here last year. This year we have Brother Billy Lambert, who's coming up from Alabama. He's the chairman of the board at Faulkner, and an elder and a preacher, both right now, and serves on one of the most watched television programs that we produce in the Churches of Christ. Great leadership skills. It's going to be a great day. And so be signing up for that. There's a sign-up sheet in the back, brothers. And so be thinking about that. Put it on your calendar. We'll have leaders from all over the Detroit area and possibly the state. So please be here on the 30th for our Leader Lift program. And then, of course, on the 31st is the 5th Sunday, the first one of this year. And that means it will be one of 3 Friends and Family Days we're going to have this year. There are little card invitations you can hand out that the office has made up. Feel free to take as many of those as you can. We've asked you to pray over folks that you want to invite and introduce to the church family. And you turned in so many of those names early on. The elders have been poring over those names, praying to God to open their hearts and their minds to the gospel. And so please, please be making your list. Be thinking about how to approach people and invite them to come with you. Let me tell you, the reason I love Friends Days is you can get people here you can't get at any other time. Because it gives you an easy excuse, an easy out to invite them. This is what you say. Hey friend, hey family, whoever it may be, would you come with me to church on the 31st? We're having an attendance day where everybody's bringing somebody. And if I don't bring anybody, I'm going to feel bad and look bad. Not really. We won't judge you. We don't do that here, right? But it gives you an excuse, right? To be able to say, hey, we're all doing this, and would you help me out? Would you help me out by coming and just that one day for that 1 hour, coming and being a part with us, and let me show you my church family. So it's a great opportunity. I hope you'll take advantage of it. Jeremiah chapter 2. Starting in verse 9 through verse 13. Now this text has so much in it, but is focused upon the words found in verse 11, the second half of the verse. But my people have changed their glory for that which does not profit. One version says they exchanged their glory for something less. And that's our focus this morning. It speaks to the idea, first of all, of lost potential. Have you ever seen someone that was so frustrating to you because you believe so much in their potential and they just seem to not care about it at all? Squander it away? When I was coaching football, we had a boy who had the most potential of any kid, high school kid I'd ever had any interaction with. I mean, he was big. Really big. And that's an advantage in the game of football. Maybe not in soccer, but in football, that's what we call it here in the United States. The others call it football other places, but here it's football. It is an advantage to be big. Not only was he big, he had hands that were like football magnets. I mean, every time the ball came his way, he had it. He had it. He had it. He had it. I mean, because they were big old hands and the boy could catch. Not only that, he could run fast when he wanted to. He could run fast. Not only that, he had a daddy who was so excited about the potential of his son and was talking to everybody about, yeah, we're hoping to find out where he'll be able to play in college and all of this. And the deal is that it was so disappointed to myself and everybody else that was involved with this kid, because all of those potentials, all of those markers were true. Big, strong, fast, great hands, everything you need. I mean, D1 level tight end, if you wanted to be. Here's the only problem. He was lazy. I don't mean just a little bit lazy. Everybody, all of us get a little bit lazy from time to time, right? I mean, like lazy was dripping out of his pores, okay? I mean, he'd open his mouth and he couldn't hardly say very much because he was too lazy to finish his sentence. I mean, almost like that. I mean, this kid wouldn't run. Everybody else would be running, and we'd seen, because you measure speeds and stuff at the beginning, we'd seen, and I mean, there were big old guys 3 times his size that would beat him because at the end he's just kind of dragging, And you'd see him do great in practice, and then you get in a game, and the second half's always harder than the first half because you're exhausted by then. And he'd be like, Coach, I got to come out. I'm tired. It's like, I thought you wanted to play college football. You got to have numbers, yards, and touchdowns to do that. And it was so exasperating. I ran into his daddy one time out away from school. And his daddy's like, yeah, we're so excited about it. We don't know where he's going to. And I said, can I tell you something? I would want to know this if it were my son. Your son's never going to play any college ball that's any significance. And the look on his face, I felt bad after that because the poor guy had just shattered his whole world, And he said, well, I thought I said, he's lazy. I said, you want it. We want it for him. The problem is, he doesn't want it. Now, that is one of 1,000 illustrations that I have observed in my lifetime of squandered, wasted potential and opportunity. Have you? I mean, in education, sports, in career. I mean, you see it all the time. And spiritually. Potential that is just squandered. And what I really love is the word in this text. And what it communicates to us is such a powerful truth that we overlook. He says they have exchanged. They have traded. What we have to understand is that everything in life is a bargain. I don't mean a bargain as in you're getting a good deal, using your Kohl's cash or whatever. I don't mean it that way. I mean exchange, or it's a bargain in the sense that you're bartering. You're trading. In fact, financially, when you buy something, all you're doing is striking a bargain. You're trading. You're trading paper bills or numbers on your credit card transferred into their bank for whatever it is they're giving you in return. It's just a trade. Life is a bargain. And we understand the currency of money, but we don't understand the extremely valuable currency of time. Because time is intriguing. Imagine if you were given $100,000 a day, but your account went to zero at midnight every night. Well, you would try to use that money every day, right? Because you don't have it. You can't build it up. That's how time is. You get 24 hours with 60 minutes each every single morning. And you can invest those wisely. But they don't build up. You don't get them back tomorrow. You don't get to keep the leftovers that you don't use. All you have left for what bargains you make with that time during today's 24 hours is the things you exchange it for. Right? If you got that $100,000 every day, you'd be spending it on stuff that's going to last. Right? That'd be the only smart thing to do. Because your account's going back to zero. So you're going to spend it. And hopefully, wisely, because whatever you purchase, you'll still have. Do you understand the analogy of time? Time, we barter with it every day. And sometimes we strike poor bargains. And that's the point he's trying to make here. He says they've exchanged something precious for something less. They have traded potential for something that is meaningless. And we see it literally all the time. And the truth is, we do it ourselves. Even the most disciplined of us. We have room to grow in how we spend, in what kind of bargain we strike with the most precious commodities we have, which aren't our finances. They're our time and our focus and the centering of our mind and our faith. What kind of potential do we have, and what kind of bargain do we strike? Do we see the vast potential of what the church can be, what we can be, if we invest those moments, if we invest our heart, if we invest our focus, if we make a good bargain? Matthew 28:18-20, as Jesus is about to ascend, he promises them, he says, go into all the world and preach the gospel unto every nation, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to observe all that I commanded you. And then he says this, and lo, I'm with you always to the very end of the world. Some say age, but either one is the same point. And so as he tells us to go and make disciples, which is what we're trying to do with our Come and See theme this year, listen to the promise, and lo, I will be with you always. He says, when you invest in this objective, it is not going to be wasted. The Lord says His word will never return what? Void. It is not exchanging for something meaningless. People, the things that people make exchanges for, it's shocking to me. The people who have credit card debt and they, buy burgers on their credit cards. Do you realize that if you pay interest for 10 years on money on a burger, then you just ate a $911 burger? That's a terrible exchange. It's terrible. But yet people, we do that, and we do it worse with our focus, with our time, with our emotional and spiritual energy. And Jesus says this will not return void. In Acts 2:47, we see potential, because it tells us, it says, praising God and having favor with all the people, and the Lord was adding to their number day by day those who were being saved. That shows the potential they had, because they were focused. They were investing their time, their energy, their faith in the things of God, and it was returning manifold returns. And so, we ask the question as we look back at our text in Jeremiah 2, what kind of bargains do we strike? And in this passage he's talking about Israel, but we always have to pay attention to any instruction to Israel, because we are spiritual Israel. And everything true of the shadow in the Old Testament, the physical nation, people of God, is true in principle and application to those of us who are the reality, who are the conclusion, who are the manifestation of the true people of God. Anything applying to Israel as His children applies equally powerfully to you. And so He tells them here, in verse 9, He says, therefore, I will contend with you, declares the Lord. Now those words would be intriguing to hear. I will contend with you. That says, we're going to have it out. God says that to them. That's strong language. And with your sons I will also contend. For cross to the coastlands of Kittim and see, and send to Kedar and observe closely and see if there's been such a thing as this. He says, listen, I'm going to tell you what I observed, and you just tell me. When you step back and look at it, send folks out, investigate this. That's fine. Fact check me. But let me ask you, do you see it too? Has a nation changed gods when there are not gods? You see, in this particular passage, I don't think he's asking them, why are you turning back to the gods of your fathers, of the pagans, rather than the God of your father? Because they do that a lot in the Old Testament. They have idolatry, but notice the language here. Are you turning back to gods, which is not really a god? There was some of that happening, but this isn't just about idolatry. This is about the idolatry of heart as well. You can say God is the only God and not be worshiping some image made of gold or silver or wood and still have turned your heart from God. And so we asked them, are you simply turning to these other gods? But my people have changed their glory for that which does not profit. Be appalled, O heavens, at this, and shudder and be desolate, declares the Lord. Now listen to his language. And I think it's so important that when we read the Bible, we don't just read for words, we listen for the tone of words. Do you ever listen to an audiobook? I listen to them all the time when I'm traveling, and even in the 25 minute drive from the church to my house, I listen to my audiobooks. And what I love about audiobooks, it's a little different than on the page, is you've got a professional reader, a narrator, and he is adding voice inflection. He is adding tone to those words. And it makes them come alive, doesn't it? Because when he reads, I love you, it's not just I love you. It's, I love you. When he reads, I hate you and I'm going to get you. It's not just I hate you and I'm going to get you. It's I hate you and I'm going to get you. It's a difference, right? When we read the scriptures, I think it's very important that we listen not just for words, but we listen for tone. And in this text, listen to the words of God. He says to them, be appalled, O heavens, and shudder, be desolate, declares the Lord. Now what we have to see is there's two aspects of his tone. The first is that he is upset. He's angry. But that's not his only emotion that's coming through these words. There's also the emotion of pleading. Everyone who's a parent who's lived through the nightmare known as teenage years, well, not always, but most of the time. I mean, you know what I'm talking about here. You can be so filled with rage while still being so filled with love. Have you ever been there? I mean, and your tone can be dripping with sheer anger, yet be laced with a pleading concern, right? You can be begging your kids to do right while you're chastising them for doing wrong. And most of the time, that's exactly how that conversation goes. And that's what I hear when I read these words to the Israelites. It's a pleading patience laced with exasperation. He is a long-suffering Lord who just wants them to stop having their hearts divided, to stop turning to idolatry, to stop ignoring God. Stop. And so yes, he points it out, and yes, he condemns in his words, while at the same time saying, just stop. Just turn your heart back to me. And this pleading, long-suffering Lord is the God that we've always known. God has always pleaded with his people with them and with us. With you. With me. With a longing that we repent and that we become always focused on Him. In Jeremiah 6:16, it says, "Thus saith the Lord, stand ye in the ways, and see, and ask the old paths, where the good way, and walk therein. You shall find rest for your souls." But they said, "We will not walk therein." You see, God is telling them, you know what to do. You know what's right. You've had that conversation with parents as well. You know what's right. Just do it again. And what's God desire in that? Just to accentuate all the wrong? Just to be a blame thrower? As He points the finger, no, that's the devil's job. He's the great accuser, not God. God's the great appealer. God pleads. That's why in 2 Peter it says, God is not slack in His promises, as some would count slackness, but He is long-suffering toward us, not willing that any should perish, but all should come to repentance. Which leads us to verse 10 through verse 12, and then on into verse 13, where it says that they indeed were a foolish people. It says there, we just read those verses, but the second emphasis here is that you've exchanged something that was valuable for something that is nothing. You have spiritually charged a burger that you're going to be paying for the rest of your life if you continue down this path. He says it's foolishness. Israel exchanged her glory for the worthless. That's what idolatry was. That's what turning away from God to the ways of the world was and is. They had Jehovah's providence, His provision, and His word, and they squandered it. They wasted it. They made a poor, foolish bargain. And it begs the question, if physical Israel did that, does spiritual Israel, do we do that? Do we ever exchange His promise, His provision, or His word for something less? Do we ever exchange the meaningful for an inconsistent and empty compromise because in the moment we're just thinking about ourselves rather than what all has been afforded to us, what all has been blessed toward us? I don't know if several years ago there was a movie, Anthony Hopkins starred in it, that was a true story about the ship Amistad. I don't know if anybody ever saw that. But it's a true historical account. And it tells the story of Cinque. Now Cinque was an African who was born to royalty in Africa. But during the horrors of the slave trade, in the very beginning of the 19th century, in the 1800s, he was captured in West Africa, he and 50 other slaves, and they were being carried on a Spanish ship, Spanish slave ship. And they rose up. They rebelled against their captors. They killed all the crew except 2 crewmen because Cinque and the other ones didn't know how to pilot the ship. They didn't know how to get back. So they told them they would spare their lives if they would take them back home to Africa. But they were deceived. The first mate of the ship deceived them and set a course, and they landed in Connecticut. In Connecticut, and this is historical, you can look it up, they were charged with murder and mutiny. And many folks, especially in the northern United States at that time, which didn't have slavery, were just incensed by this injustice. That these folks were captured against their will and subjected to such evil and torture. And they rose up against their captors and set themselves free. And now they're being tried for murder and mutiny. And so a hero stepped in to their aid the former president of the United States, John Quincy Adams. And he represented them. And he fought long and hard and used all of his great legal mind and oratory skills. And sure enough, he secured the entire group with an acquittal and a return voyage back home to Africa. Now that is a great story. But it has a tragic side note. Because Cinque went home to Africa. Everything he'd fought for, all the injustice had been vindicated. But when he got home to Africa, he went into business as a slave trader. And when you look at that, you want to just ask him, after you've been given this, after you've been blessed with freedom, and after you've been blessed with justice, after all the injustice that had been done to you, why would you trade that to go back and do that very thing which had threatened to destroy you? Because that's what it means to exchange something valuable for something else just because we want it in the moment. And so he tells them that, and then he wraps up in the next verse by explaining what their real problem was, and it's twofold. He says in verse 13, "For my people have committed two evils. First, they have forsaken me, the living fountain of living water, to hew for themselves cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold no water." Now in this, he says there's two things that are the reality, that are the method whereby they were exchanging the glorious for the meaningless. First of all, they forsook the Lord, the fountain of living water. They had the pretense of faithfulness, but that pretense was hollow. They went to temple, they did their sacrifices, but they didn't mean it. And I'll tell you, just because something looks a certain way on the outside doesn't mean it has any real substance. I've heard the story of the lieutenant colonel who was elevated to a full bird colonel, promoted during the Gulf War. And he was in his new office, and he was putting away all of his books and his different things and hanging them on the wall. And he was brand new to this and was excited about the promotion. And here he sees a private with a toolbox walking his way. And he thinks to himself, I need to really leave an impression on my new staff. I need to show them that I am a commander of authority to be respected. So he sits down at his desk, he picks up his phone, and he starts a conversation, with the dead phone in his hand. And he says, listen, yes, General Schwarzkopf. Oh, I think that's a good plan, and you have my full support in that. And General, yes, I think that's great. And you just feel free to call me anytime. All right, Norm, see you later. Hangs up. He says, yes, Private, what can I do for you? And sheepishly, the private said, well, Colonel, I'm just here to hook up your phone. You see, pretense can be very, very hollow. And in religion, there's no place in life it's more hollow than a pretensive religion. When it's just all about how it looks and going through the motions, there's nothing more hollow. That's why Jesus said, you're just a bunch of whitewashed tombs to the Pharisees that are pretty on the outside, but you're full of dead men's bones on the inside. The hollowness of pretense. When you don't fully drink of living water, then nothing else will ever satisfy. He says, you've forsaken the fountain of living water. And then he says, and you have dug for yourself, hewn for yourself cisterns, that cannot hold water. Here's the thing. Living water can only be held in a vessel that's holy enough to hold it. And the only way we can be that vessel for His living water and be filled and be satisfied and have meaning and purpose and be effective and have everything we invest, that we barter our time and energy and faith for, have that return to us with great value, is if we have a cistern, if we are a vessel that God is crafting and working through. Because when we build our own cisterns, then they leak. They leak out our joy. They leak out our satisfaction. They leak out our meaning. And you know, when a vessel leaks, it's not full very long. Pretty soon it's empty. He says you can't hew out these cisterns for yourself. People make all sorts of cisterns, thinking that will fill them up. Worldliness, lust, poor relationships, fame, power. Religiously, it's all about emotionalism for some. For others, it's all about entertainment. For others, there's so many different things that people try to capture living water. Which, you know what living water is? It's life. But the life of worldly people leak. It leaks. And whatever life they feel is very fleeting. Because it's diminishing. And then they have to try to fill it up with something else. And then it leaks even more. See, nothing can replace relationship with our Maker. And we wonder why all of these things are empty. So folks, when you don't have your focus on the main thing, then it's always going to leave you empty. There was a president of a dog food company. And he had his meeting with all of his managerial staff and was quite concerned because their dog food wasn't doing very well. It wasn't selling very well. And so he said to the advertising manager, "How's our advertising?" To which the manager said, "Well, it's great." He says, "The ad campaign that we're running will probably win the industry's top awards this year." And every, response group that they say the ad is so entertaining. It's so good. And so the president said, "All right." And he turned and talked to the production manager and says, how's our product design? And the manager said, "Well, it's great, boss. I mean, our new label and packaging scored higher in every market test that we ran from every competitor." Puzzled, the boss turned over and said, "Well, how about our sales staff? Are they doing their job?" And the sales manager was quick to respond, "Yes, sir. Our people are the best in the business. We've spared no expense. They're beating the pavement, making calls day in and day out." And there was heavy silence as the president thought in great frustration. And he said, "We've got great advertising. We've got great packaging. We've got a top-notch sales force. Yet our product is coming in dead last in the dog food industry. Does anybody know what the problem was?" And one of the manager's little assistants sheepishly raised his hand and said, "Well, sorry, sir, but it's those stupid dogs. They just won't touch the stuff." Now, there's a point. All the other stuff is fine if you've got a good product. But if you don't get first things first, the rest of it is just empty. And here's the thing. There's a lot of things that are fine to, flavor our lives. Great relationships. I love having a great marriage and great relationships with our kids. But that in and of itself, if that's all I have, it will leak out. Having a good career, that's good. But if that's all you have, your cistern won't hold just that. It'll leak out. Having good worship and a good preacher and a great song leader, I mean, that's good, but if that's all it is, in all of these areas, he says, don't make your own cisterns. And the point of it all is stop exchanging that which is meaningful, your faith, your love, your hope, for that which isn't. Exchange it for that which will give you an eternal return. Store up for yourselves in treasures in heaven, where moth and rust doth not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. This morning, as we reflect on all of these things, and as we think about what it means to invite and try to share our faith with others, I ask you this. When it comes to your faith, when it comes to your time, when it comes to your energy, when it comes to your hope, when it comes to your focus, what kind of bargains are you making? And then secondly, what kind of cisterns do you rely on? Because if it just feels like life's up and down and up and down, you know, you're filled for a while and then you're empty, and then you're filled for a while and then you're empty. The Bible calls that an unstable man, tossed to and fro by every wind, because what it means is something, you've sprung a leak. You've got a cistern with cracks. And you'll never fix it by just pouring more in. Right? You don't fix a leaky tire just by keeping airing it up all the time. You don't fix a leaky basin by just putting more in it. It's still going to leak. The only cistern that can fill up with living water, that can fill up with life, is the one that comes from real, not the pretense, real relationship with Him. If you need to make any kind of change today, you know it. You know it. And here you don't have to be afraid to do that. Because we've all been there. Many of us are all still there at times. We just want to support you. Let us do that. Come up here and give me a hug. And allow the elders that come up and share with you, let them hug you, and the throng of people that'll come up afterwards and just tell you we're with you and we're on your side and we're hand in hand. Come right now as we stand and as we sing.